everybody, I'm Pia from Stitches and Scraps. Today I'm going to show you how to make this Tunisian twist ear warmer. I'm using some Brava worsted weight yarn left over from what Knit Picks had sent me for an earlier project. My color A is called Dublin and my color B is called Fig. Start by chaining as many chains as you will need stitches for the size that you're making. For this tutorial, I'm going to go ahead and just do the smallest size, which is 9 stitches. And you don't need any extra chains for a turning chain or anything like that, just the number of stitches you want. So in this case, I have 9. Now this loop is already coming out of this first stitch, so we don't need to pick up a loop in the first stitch. We're going to go across, and I like to work in the back bumps, but you can work however you work into a chain. We're going to go across and we're going to pick up a loop in each chain all the way across. So there's 2, 3, and we skipped the first one because there was already a loop coming out of it. When we're done, we should have 9 loops on our hook. Now here is where we introduce our second color. Every row in Tunisian crochet is going to have a forward pass, which is what we just did, and then a reverse pass where we work all these loops off the hook. For this pattern, we're going to always do the forward pass in one color and then the reverse pass in the other color. So let's do our reverse pass. And the reverse pass is the same for every single row that we do. You're first going to chain 1, which means you yarn over and you pull through just the first loop on your hook. Okay? After that, you're going to yarn over and pull through 2 loops all the way across. It's going to be the 1 loop in the new color and 1 loop in the old color. And you're going to keep doing that all the way across until you come to the end of the row. And there we go. We've got 1 loop left on our hook and we've worked off all our stitches. This was our foundation row. For the next row, we're going to do Tunisian simple stitch, which means we insert our hook under this vertical bar of the stitch below, yarn over and pull up a loop. And now we keep doing that across. Notice that I skipped the first vertical bar. You're always going to skip the first stitch in this pattern because your loop at the end is already coming out of that stitch. So we're just going to keep pulling up loops all the way across under this vertical bar. Now when we come to the last stitch, and it doesn't matter so much on the first row, but it'll start to matter after that, we're going to want to go under not just this loop, not just this vertical loop, but also the strand of the other color thread where we pulled it up from the previous row. Now in this case, this is just the tail, but you'll see that in more detail when we get to the next row. And that will help keep your edge nice and neat and not show any carried yarns across the edge. So every time we finish our forward pass, we should have the same number of stitches on our needle, on our hook, and we have 3, 6, 9 stitches. So that's our forward pass for the Tunisian simple stitch row. Now remember, we're going to change colors at this end every time. So I drop that color and I pick up my color A. And try not to get tangled in the tail. There we go. Then we start our reverse pass with a chain 1. And now we're going to yarn over and pull through 2 all the way across, just like on every other row. So that was our Tunisian simple stitch row, and you can see that it makes these vertical bars stand out on the row below it. Next, we're going to do a Tunisian knit stitch row. Again, we skip the first stitch. This time, instead of inserting our hook under the vertical bar, notice that there's a vertical bar at the back as well, right? We're going to stick our hook between those two and out the back, just like that. So now yarn over and pull up a loop, and you can see how that opens up the stitch and makes both of those vertical bars visible. You'll end up with a V shape that looks very much like a knit stitch. Like that, all the way across. Now here when we get to the end, again, we're going to insert our hook like normal, but notice that little extra strand of the other color? That was where we brought it up from the row below. So we want to grab that as well, just to keep our edge nice and neat. So here are my 9 stitches on my hook, and now we're going to change color. Chain 1. And then yarn over and pull through 2 all the way across. Now we're back to where we started, and we're ready to do another Tunisian simple stitch row. For the rest of the pattern, you're going to repeat these 2 rows until you reach the length that you want. The length for each size is specified in the pattern. You want to make sure, if you're measuring it around your head, that you leave maybe 1/4 to 1/2 inch of extra space for the seam when we make the knot, so that it's not too tight around your head. And remember to position it where you want it, down around your ears, not up above them, because that will make a slight difference in the length that you need as well. Here is my ear warmer, which I made in a larger size with 17 stitches across. Notice that it does curl at the end, and that's perfectly normal. That will be fixed when we seam it. And I'm now ready to bind off my work. Binding off for this pattern is super easy. All we're going to do is work a series of slip stitches across, starting as though we were working Tunisian simple stitch. So again, we skip our first stitch, and now we go just like we would for Tunisian simple stitch under that vertical bar, and we just this time do a slip stitch. So we're pulling up that loop, but then we're finishing by pulling it through the stitch that's on our hook. Now you want to make sure that you do this fairly loosely. It's not going to matter too much since we're sewing a knot in at this end, but it's a good practice to work on getting your bind off nice and loose so that it's at the same tension as the stitches around it. And you can see I'm just doing slip stitches all the way down until I've bound off all of these stitches. And that just gives us a nice finished edge. There we go. Now I can fasten off just like I normally would. I'm leaving an extra long tail for sewing. I've probably left way too long of a tail. I cut this a little earlier, but I prefer to have too much rather than too little. You probably only need about 12 to 14 inches. The other tail I cut to a normal length because I'll just weave that in later. This is the end I'm going to be using to seam the ear warmer together later. So before I do, I want to go ahead and weave in all these other smaller ends just to get them out of the way. I've woven in all my other ends, and now I'm ready to sew this together. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lay it flat with the right side up. Then I'm going to take each of these short ends and fold it in half just like this. Take this end and fold it in half the same way. Make sure I'm keeping that tail out of the way because I'm going to need that. Okay, so fold it in half just like that. Now I've got my 2 halves, right? Open them up and sandwich them inside of each other like this. And this is why I left the ends 2 different colors, because I wanted to be able to see that I'm alternating my layers. Make sure you have it lined up just as well as you possibly can. Go ahead and take some time to get this nice and even. And there we go. Let me zoom in on that. I have the 4 layers sandwiched together. Okay, so now all I have to do is just sew through these layers. So I'm going to start all the way at this end here and just whip stitch, making sure that on every stitch I'm getting through all 4 of these layers, and I'm trying to stay as close to the top as I can and go through every single stitch. Take your time with this. You want to make sure you get every single layer for a nice clean knot. And you can go back over it in the opposite direction again to make it extra strong if you want to. Okay, I'm going to check this before I weave in the end because I can still undo it now fairly easily. We turn this back the right side, flatten out our seam here, and you can block it to get it even nicer and more flat. But there is our nice flat seam. I'm happy with the way that looks. I actually wish I'd gotten a little farther under this edge so I didn't see those stitches. So what I can do is come back in and let's see, that is this edge here. So I can fold this back, find my seam, there it is, and come in a little bit lower on those stitches under there. And this is why you want to test it before you weave in your ends. Okay, that should take care of it. And this is also why I like to leave an extra long tail. And now when I fold it back, there we go. Now when I fold it back, I don't see that edge anymore, and I'm much happier with that knot. So now I'm ready to weave in this end, and then I'll be all done. And that's how you make this Tunisian twist ear warmer. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up, share it with your friends, or leave me a comment. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel for more great videos. Thanks for watching.